Hello everybody, Adrian Plass here,
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
and I'm absolutely 1% sure that this is number 284 in Sounding the Shallows.
We do hope we're going to manage to do this because we've both got coughs,
I'm
haven't
battling towards, doing this, yes, we have got coughs, yeah.
we? So if we
I'll
cough,
tell you what, we not only we've got coughs, we're expecting a delivery, and the dog wants us to play with her. So other than that, what could possibly go wrong?
other than that, we're very serene and
But actually, we were quite taken with the fact that last week we talked about sanctuary, and I had never realised, you'd looked at what it meant, and I had never known what it actually, I mean, I knew the fundamental thing that you could get sanctuary, but
yeah.
I didn't know how it worked or what the numbers were. Or
Well,
anything about it.
anybody who might have tuned in last week, will remember that we were talking about Durham Cathedral in particular, and the knocker that's on one of the doors, which was the sanctuary knocker, and that if you were in trouble, if you were done something against the law, or you were at the end, you were being chased or whatever, if you could get your hands on that knocker. There would be two priests in little windows watching out, and they would let you in, and you would have 37 days of pure safety. You would be given food, you would be given somewhere to sleep, and then at the end of those days you had to make a decision whether you were going to go through the courts or face your pursuers, or actually walk on foot to the nearest port, whereby you would be put on a boat, on a ship, and you would never return to the country. So that was what they had to face in the 37 days. But it's triggered off some really interesting things. We now have the dog barking, and we have our clock, which sounds like a bird every hour, tweeting. So, this is quite a cacophony of sound around us, Adrian.
Don't be distracted by all that.
Yeah. Anyway. We were really interested in some of the things that you've said to us, and we're going to share quite a few of them, aren't we?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. We always appreciate reading things when they come.
And certainly one of them, it very much is place, that for her is sanctuary. And it made us realise and remember that, our time at Scargill House, we were aware, weren't we, that for some people it was a sanctuary. In other words, it was a safe place to be tucked away from the rest of life, whether it was a difficult life or a pressured life or demands on them, feelings that they were failing, just for the while that they were there. And it was often a weekend. It wasn't 37 days.
I can remember a few people coming and someone we didn't know, who wasn't known there, would come in and put up a front, having half guessed what the spiritual temperature was there, to show that he was part of it and belonged. And actually, the only thing you had to do to belong was to kind of give up belonging and just be there.
Yes.
And that was unusual for a lot of people, I think, and really, really useful, I think.
I think that's where this idea of spiritual home comes from, that feeling you've come home for a little while. Obviously, for some people, they've lived in the same house all their lives, but for a lot of people, they left home at some point, didn't they?
Yeah.
And went somewhere else. So that sense of coming home for a little while, especially if it was a good home. But that thing about place, certainly one of the people emailing talked about her. Well, she has two special places. One is a woods, and one is St Albans Abbey. And they're both places where when she gets there, she can relax. She can feel it's okay. It's all right to be her. It's all right to think. But she also mentioned something that I remember when you first started writing. You might tune in with this, because she talks about coffee shops.
Yeah.
And she says coffee shops have been a refuge. I don't know whether that quite fits with sanctuary, but certainly a place where you could lose yourself in the middle of the sounds and busyness of other people around. And she talks about meeting somebody she describes as being an elderly man, which I think is getting more and more worrying, but who'd started talking very tentatively and ended up talking about himself.
Yeah.
And she realised that he was probably more lonely than she was. Talked quite a lot about the fact that he'd been to the church sometimes but hadn't been for a long time, might like to go and sing some carols. And she said after a while she realised her parking time was running out, so she left. But he said he'd stay for a while, possibly in the hope that someone else would talk to him. And she says there's something warm and welcoming about certain coffee shops. So I think they really are a place of sanctuary for people on their own.
Yeah.
And then we talk a lot about warm places at the moment for people to come. And I think we tend to think of the radiators being on, but that idea of walking through a door and thinking, oh, I can relax for a little while.
Well, actually, in Tunbridge Wells, there was a church in the High Street when I was growing up, which usually had nobody in it. And I used to just drift in there. And there were two seats at the front. One was one which I didn't know this, but it was reserved for the bishop.
Oh, really?
And then there was all the pews. And then there was another one at the other side of the opposite the bishop's one, which was quite comfortable. But I loved going in there. And one day I was in there, and I sat on the bishop's chair, and a man who must have been a church warden or somebody who worked or was part of it anyway came in and looked at me and said, "You do know that's the bishop's chair, don't you?" And I said, "No, I didn't know it was the bishop's chair. What do you mean by that?" He said, "Well, we reserve it for when the bishops come." So I said, in my normal jolly way, "Well, I don't think the bishop would probably mind if I sat in his chair." And he said, "I think there's something in the Gospels, isn't there, about he who would like to be first will be last, and he who will be last will be..."
Was he laughing
No,
by then?
not
Oh,
in the
my
slightest.
goodness. Oh, no.
So I reluctantly climbed out of the bishop's chair and sat on a pew, but I think he really thought he ought to be rid of me altogether. But there have been buildings like that, but I don't know I think that's just... I don't know, a little island to be on for a short time.
I remember one of our sons, when things were really tricky for him, there was a bookshop with a coffee place, and you could actually borrow, really, take from the shelf a book that you might, presumably they were thinking you might like to buy. But he would sit there for hours, and he would just be for a while.
Yeah.
And again, it's that
He
idea
loved
of...
it, didn't he?
But it's that
Absolutely
idea
loved
of
it.
being safe from all the pressures that we're demanding for him to cope. So thank you for that, because that triggered off so many thoughts in us, really, and I think it will in other people. So what else did we have?
Well, we have one here from a lady who writes to us quite often, I'm pleased to say. And she said, "It made me think of the last church I attended and why I don't go there anymore." She said it's because somewhere, it should be somewhere that feels like a sanctuary but doesn't anymore. I mean, sorry, I read that wrongly. Because it had turned from somewhere where you belonged to somewhere where you didn't feel it was a sanctuary anymore. And I suppose that means... And what that leads me to think about, and always has led me to think about, is the fact that the initial interaction between God and human beings, men and women, is the acceptance. It's not the change. You don't. It's not that once you've become this, that, or the other, you will be okay, but that.
Jesus didn't look for finished articles, and yet for some reason, I mean, if you think about the people he chose, they hadn't even begun on any sort of journey like that. Yeah, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I wasn't going to say anything. I know people would say, well, you have to move forward at some point. But if you have, I was saying to somebody just this week, that if you don't feel loved in this thing about faith, it's a very poor place to start. To believe in where you are and how much you're wanted there.
And that, yes, I mean that comes back to the church then, doesn't it? She didn't feel safe or loved, clearly. I mean, does that mean that church should be a permanent sanctuary. You know, I mean, this thing about Durham giving you 37 days. I mean, should church be like that, offering a place of safety forever?
Well, if
On
you-
one level, I think probably it must, but that doesn't mean to say you stay hidden in it, does it?
Well, if you're defining it as the people in it, that's what you're talking about. It should be a place where, among those people, you can feel you have sanctuary, that you're safe, and you don't have to. You don't have to. It isn't even that you get rid of them. It's that you can have those things on you, in you, around you, but they know about it and it's okay.
They know about it. They
Yeah,
know
I
you.
think so, yeah.
And they might laugh at some of the things or get fed up with you about some of those things, but they don't let you go because you're part of them.
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't in the same email that you were just referring to, didn't she say that for her it's to do with her friends?
Yes, hold on, I'll have a look for it. Yeah, she says, I thought of my closest friend, who I feel totally safe with, and our friendship is like a sanctuary. I think we know about that, don't we?
Yeah, well, that's really what you were saying.
Yeah. We check in with each other every day, and when we meet, which is not as often as we'd like, it's like getting a refill of something wholesome that we take away with us.
Yeah, I love that because I was remembering, Adrian, about. Do you remember when we were in Northern Ireland one time and we met this group of women, and they were just so happy with each other.
They were
And
selling
do you remember
books
what
for
they were
us.
selling books for us?
And one was in a wheelchair,
Yeah. Yeah.
not that means anything, but that she was, and there were 2 or 3 others. And you're right, they were really happy.
Yes, and we'd done something in the church which had been lovely, and it was a very warm, friendly church. But they
I
were
asked
telling
them
us
why they were so happy.
That's right.
I
Yes.
just
what
said
you-
to them, why are you so happy?
Yeah.
You look really happy. And they said, oh, well, yes, we get on very well together. And I said, well, so do you go to this church then? They said, oh, yes, we do. But there was a sort of raised note at the end. I said, well, what else do you do? And they said, and they looked a bit guilty, and they said, well, what we do is, after church, every Sunday, we get up and we go down to McDonald's.
That's right. That's
And
right.
we have, and then they went through their list of things
They did.
they have. And they said, we sit at a table in there and we talk about our lives and our families, and sometimes we pray there.
She did. She said they
Sometimes
laughed,
we
they
cry a
cried.
bit,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So for them, a very important aspect of what we call church happened in McDonald's, which McDonald's might be a little surprised to hear about. But
Certainly, I think, some people would say it would be their home group where they were able to do that, ideally, not somewhere where you sit miserably around and wait for it to finish. I mean, I think that idea that you really get to know people and they feel it's all right to really talk about who they are is interesting, because we so easily create ideas that are not don't fill up the concept. I mean, she also talks about home, because people often talk about home being a sanctuary, and
Yeah.
she actually talked about her home. Our first email writer had mentioned home and said that obviously we had said that home can be a place of sanctuary. And she said to some extent her home is, but not as much as she would like it to be, because
Yeah,
it was
she
home.
says,
No, our first emailer
yes,
said
yeah.
it was home when her mum
Yeah,
was alive.
that's right,
And her
yeah,
mum always said how nice it was to get home, but her mum isn't there anymore. So that sanctuary concept of home being somewhere that holds you and loves you has gone for her.
Yeah. Yes, what about when home is no longer a sanctuary? Yeah.
Well,
Maybe
for this person, it's
the other
because
said it made me think of my family home, which was burnt down.
Yes.
Long story, she says in brackets, and how a place that used to be safe and a place where I could be myself is now an actual source of pain and grief whenever I think of it.
But by contrast, we had another email from somebody we've often heard from in Australia. And it's so interesting because he's talking about their home, him and his wife, and how I don't think they'd quite realised how much of a sanctuary that could be for people. And he tells us that there was a guy who was living with us then, until he could buy his own place. And then he did buy his own place. But he used to live over the road. And then he would always come and stay with them. Anyway, he moved, fine. And then he came back the next day in tears and said he hated living on his own and
right,
loved
yeah.
living with us. And so there was sort of that sense of home being something he hadn't realised just how valuable a gift that had been for him. It's such a lovely story. We can't really expand on it now, but this guy was saying it's so nice to feel that they've been able to offer sanctuary and that it enabled growth. And he said, hopefully we do that. Oh my goodness, hopefully we do that. With all of us, that our home could be somewhere where people feel welcomed when they walk through the door.
Yeah, where they can just take off the chains, And that one more quick one from an old friend of ours. A few thoughts he was giving us about having read Terry Waite's autobiography.
Oh, yes, that's really
Taken
interesting.
on Trust, and he talks about it's a very painful read because he was kidnapped and was held in prison for a long time. And he eventually reached a point where he accepted he had to find sanctuary within himself and God, because the outside circumstances were so unremittingly grim and
it's an
uncertain.
extraordinary idea, isn't it? There he is in solitary confinement, having to find it within himself.
Yeah. It was very interesting, actually. He talked about how Terry Waite had to face the fact that he was a very ordinary man in an exceptionally unpleasant situation. And I think that's what gets to people sometimes, that they feel a lack of wonderfulness in themselves when it
Yes.
comes to dealing with life.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, let's just finish with this email, and then we heard from the guy who we wouldn't be able to do this recording without him
Australia,
in
yeah.
Australia, who, bless his heart, faithfully puts this up onto YouTube, etc., every week for us. And he was making the point that sanctuary is the part that's set aside as being the holiest place. And I love that, really. This other person was saying that they remembered a song, "You Are My Hiding Place." I mean, you're my hiding place. Don't you think that is just beautiful, really? The very holiest of holy is...
But I'll tell you what I think is, you're going to read a poem now, which has meant a great deal to us. One of the central things about a sanctuary is that it doesn't interfere with you.
Okay.
It doesn't try to get in you or change you. It doesn't interfere. And it wants
Which comes
to.
right back to Durham Cathedral.
Yeah,
They were given a place to be, food, and somewhere to sleep. But they weren't clearly accepted and forced to do anything.
That word, interfering, is really important, I think. You don't want a safe place to be saying you shouldn't be safe here. It's saying you are safe here.
Yes.
And that's what this
And when you're ready...
this poem is written by someone who'd been in a prison camp during the
It
war.
is. It's a poem we've loved, and we may have even read it on this. Jonathan Maginot. The house of God will never close to them that yearn, nor will the wicks die out that in the branches turn, and all the pathways to God's house will be converging. In quest of nests, the migrant pigeons will come surging. And when at close of crimson nights and frenzied days you'll writhe in darkness and will struggle in a maze of demons' toils, with ashes strewn upon your head and lead-shot blood and quicksand for your feet to tread, The silent house of God will stand in silent glade. It will not chide, or blame, or scoff, will not upbraid, and the door will be wide open, and the light will burn, and none will beckon you, and none repel with stern rebuke, for upon the threshold love will wait to bless and heal your bleeding wound and soothe your sore distress.
Not beckoned and not repelled,
Not
not
rebuked.
interfered with.
No, just said, come on in. You'll be safe here.
Sounds quite good, doesn't it? Right.
We'd love to hear some more.
Yeah.
This is so interesting. Thank you so much for writing to us.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you again next week.